You know that feeling when you get a raise and for about a week you feel completely different? You check your bank account and it actually looks good. You start thinking about upgrading things, maybe a nicer apartment, maybe finally getting that car you've been eyeing, maybe just not thinking twice when the bill comes at dinner. And then somehow, 6 months later, you're right back to stressing about money. Same tight feeling in your chest when rent is due. Same mental math at the grocery store. Except now you're making more than you ever have in your life. Sound familiar? Most people assume the answer is that they just need another raise, that the next promotion will finally be the one that fixes everything. But here's the thing almost nobody tells you. There's a specific mechanism that quietly cancels out every raise you get. And it's not laziness and it's not bad luck. It's something psychologists and financial researchers have a name for. And once you understand how it works, you'll start noticing it everywhere in your own life. My name is Jerry, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people build wealth effortlessly while others stay stuck no matter how much they earn. If you've ever felt confused about where your raise actually went, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up explaining something that's been bugging you for years. Now, before we get into the mechanism itself, let me ask you something. When you picture someone building wealth, what comes to mind? Probably someone climbing the career ladder, landing bigger salaries, moving into a corner office. The assumption baked into almost everything we're taught about money is simple. Earn more and your financial life gets easier. But that assumption is wrong for most people, and it's wrong in a really specific, measurable way. Here's what actually happens. There's a phenomenon called lifestyle creep, and it works like a treadmill that speeds up every single time you do. You start walking a little faster, feel proud of yourself, and then the belt just matches your new pace. You're working harder, moving faster, and somehow staying in exactly the same place. That's the salary trap. Every time your income goes up, your spending quietly rises right along with it, until you're right back to feeling the same amount of financial stress you felt before, just at a higher number. Think about it this way. If you were making $45,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck, then got a raise to $60,000, you'd expect to feel some relief. And you probably did, for a little while. But somewhere in that transition, your rent went up because you moved somewhere nicer. Your car payment went up because you upgraded. Your grocery bill went up because you stopped buying the store brand and started buying whatever looked good. None of these decisions felt reckless in the moment. Each one felt completely reasonable, even earned. You worked hard for that raise, so why shouldn't you enjoy it? But add them all together, and your expenses climbed just as fast as your income did, sometimes faster. And here's the part that really stings. You didn't even notice it happening. There was no single moment where you decided to blow your raise. It leaked out through a dozen small upgrades that each felt justified on their own. This isn't just a story I'm telling you to make a point. Research on savings behavior consistently shows that as household income rises, the percentage of that income actually saved barely moves for most people. And in a lot of cases, it goes down. Economists call this hedonic adaptation. Your brain has a baseline for what feels normal, and it recalibrates that baseline almost immediately after any positive change in your life. A bigger paycheck feels amazing for a few weeks. Then your brain quietly resets what normal means, and you're right back to feeling like you need more just to feel okay. This is the same mechanism behind why lottery winners often end up back where they started within a few years. It's not that they're financially illiterate. It's that human beings are remarkably bad at holding on to a feeling of abundance once their baseline shifts. Let's actually run the numbers, because this is where the salary trap becomes impossible to ignore. Imagine two people, Sarah and Mike, both making $50,000 a year. Both get identical raises over the next 10 years, eventually landing at $90,000. Sarah decides that every time she gets a raise, half of the increase goes straight into her retirement account, and half goes toward lifestyle improvements. Mike, on the other hand, lets his lifestyle expand to match nearly every dollar of his raises, the same way most people do without really deciding to. By year 10, Sarah has been investing an increasing amount every single year, letting compound growth work in her favor the entire time. Mike has been living what looks, from the outside, like a nicer version of the same paycheck-to-paycheck life. Assuming a modest 8% return, Sarah ends up with well over $200,000 in her investment account. Mike has almost nothing saved, despite earning the exact same total income over that decade. Same raises, same opportunities, completely different outcomes. The only difference is what happened to the extra money the moment it landed in their account. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because I want you to think about your own raises for a second. That promotion that came with an extra $8,000 a year, where did it actually go? Not in theory, but literally, dollar for dollar. If you're being honest with yourself, a lot of us can't answer that question with any precision, and that's exactly the problem. Money that isn't assigned a job the moment it arrives tends to dissolve into whatever your current lifestyle wants to expand into next. This is why so many people describe feeling like they're running faster and faster financially while staying in exactly the same place. It's not a metaphor. It's a mathematical description of what's happening to their savings. Now, let's talk about the specific moments where this trap tends to spring shut, because it's rarely gradual. It usually happens right after very specific triggers. The first one is a promotion or raise itself. The psychological permission that comes with "I earned this" is incredibly powerful, and it's exactly the moment marketers and lenders are waiting for. Car dealerships, apartment complexes, and credit card companies have all built entire business models around catching people in that window right after a raise, when the guardrails feel a little looser. The second trigger is a new job. Moving to a new company with a higher salary often comes bundled with a new city, a new apartment, a new car for the commute, and a wardrobe upgrade, all justified as necessary for the new role, even when they're really just lifestyle creep wearing a professional disguise. The third trigger is a bonus or windfall. Tax refunds, year-end bonuses, and stimulus checks all tend to get treated as house money, spent more loosely than income that arrives in a normal paycheck, even though it's exactly the same dollars. What makes this especially sneaky is that none of these purchases feel irresponsible in isolation. Nobody sits down and thinks, "I am going to sabotage my financial future today." They think, "I've been working really hard and I deserve a nicer place." They think, "This car is more reliable and I can afford the payment now." They think, "It's just a bonus. I'll treat myself this once." Each decision on its own is completely defensible. The problem is that these decisions stack. And once they stack high enough, they consume the entire raise before you've had a chance to redirect any of it toward your actual financial goals. There's also a social layer to this that most people don't want to admit out loud. As your income rises, so does the income of the people you tend to spend time with. Colleagues who got promoted alongside you, friends who are also climbing the ladder. And there's a quiet pressure to keep pace with that group, even when nobody says a word about it directly. Nobody explicitly tells you to buy a nicer car because your coworker did. But when everyone around you is upgrading their lifestyle in sync with their income, it becomes incredibly easy to mistake their pace for the correct pace, instead of asking what you actually want your money to be doing. So how do you actually break out of this? Because I'm not sitting here telling you that every raise should go straight into an index fund while you eat plain rice for the rest of your career. That's not realistic. And honestly, it's not even a good goal. The fix isn't to refuse every lifestyle improvement forever. The fix is to change the order of operations the moment new money arrives. The single most effective thing you can do, and the thing almost nobody does automatically, is decide in advance what percentage of every future raise gets redirected towards savings and investments before you ever see the money in your checking account. A lot of financial researchers point to something close to a 50-50 split as a sustainable middle ground. Half of every raise goes toward increasing your investing or savings rate. The other half is genuinely yours to enjoy, guilt-free, because you've already protected your future with the other half. This single decision, made once and then automated, is what separates people like Sarah from people like Mike, even when their raises are identical. The reason this works so well is that it happens before your lifestyle has a chance to expand into that money. If the extra amount never touches your regular checking account, your brain never adapts to having access to it in the first place, which means it can't become your new baseline. You're essentially giving your future self a raise at the exact same moment you give your present self one, instead of letting your present self quietly absorb the entire thing. Here's something else worth mentioning, because I see this mistake constantly. People treat their savings rate as a fixed percentage they set once, years ago, and then forget about completely. If you started investing 10% of your income back when you were making $35,000 a year, and you're still only investing 10% now that you're making $85,000, your savings rate has technically stayed the same, but your lifestyle has absorbed every single raise since then. The number on paper looks consistent. The reality is that your wealth building pace hasn't grown at all, even though your income has grown substantially.
This is why revisiting your savings percentage every time your income changes, not just once at the start of your career, is so important. Let me give you a couple more real-world examples, because I think this is where the trap really clicks for people. Think about someone who gets promoted from an individual contributor role into management. Suddenly, they're making an extra $15,000 a year. Within a few months, they've moved into a one-bedroom instead of splitting a two-bedroom with a roommate, upgraded from a 10-year-old sedan to something newer with a monthly payment, and started ordering takeout 3 or 4 times a week instead of cooking most nights. None of these things happened in a single afternoon. Each one crept in over a few months. Each one felt like a reasonable response to having more money. And by the end of the year, that entire $15,000 raise has vanished into a slightly nicer version of the exact same financial stress they had before. They're still checking their account before payday. They're still one unexpected expense away from panic. The only thing that changed is the number attached to their paycheck. Now, compare that to someone who gets the exact same promotion and the exact same $15,000 raise, but decides in advance that $7,500 of it is going straight into an investment account, split automatically the moment the new salary kicks in. They still get to enjoy some of that raise. Maybe they upgrade their apartment a little, maybe they treat themselves to something nice. But because half the raise never touches their day-to-day spending, their lifestyle only expands by half as much, while their investment account starts compounding immediately. 10 years later, one of these people has a meaningful cushion of wealth working quietly in the background. The other person has a series of slightly nicer versions of the same financial stress they've been carrying the entire time, just with better furniture. There's also a version of this trap that hits people who consider themselves financially responsible, which is honestly the version that worries me the most, because it's the hardest to spot from the inside. These are people who already have a budget, who already track their spending, who genuinely believe they're being careful with money. But their budget was built around their old income, and instead of consciously redesigning it every time their income changes, they just let each new category creep in one at a time. A slightly bigger grocery budget here, a gym membership upgrade there, a streaming subscription that seemed harmless. None of these individually break the bank, but stacked together over a few raises, they quietly absorb the exact same amount of money that could have been building real wealth. Being financially responsible with your old lifestyle doesn't protect you from lifestyle creep. Only being intentional about new money the moment it arrives does that. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because abstract advice doesn't help anyone. Say you get a raise from $60,000 to $68,000, an extra $8,000 a year, or roughly $666 a month before taxes. Under the 50-50 approach, you'd redirect around $300 to $330 a month into your retirement account or investments, automatically, ideally before it even shows up in your checking account. The remaining amount is yours. Maybe that's a nicer apartment. Maybe that's eating out more often. Maybe that's finally taking the vacation you've been putting off. The point isn't to eliminate enjoyment from your raises. The point is to make sure your future self gets an equal seat at the table, instead of getting whatever scraps happen to be left over after your lifestyle has already expanded to fill the entire increase. This approach also solves a problem that pure willpower never solves, which is decision fatigue.
If you're relying on discipline alone to resist upgrading your lifestyle every time you get more money, you're setting yourself up to lose.
Eventually, because willpower is a limited resource, and marketing departments are extremely good at exploiting exactly the moments when yours is weakest. But if the split happens automatically, the decision only has to be made once. You're not fighting the temptation of a nicer apartment listing or a flashy car ad every single month. You've already protected half the raise before the temptation even shows up. Now, I want to address something that might be nagging at you, because I know some of you are thinking it. What if lifestyle upgrades genuinely improve your life? What if the nicer apartment reduces your commute stress? Or the reliable car actually prevents expensive repairs? Or the occasional nice dinner strengthens your relationships? None of that is wrong, and I'm not suggesting you should treat every upgrade as a moral failure. The salary trap isn't about avoiding all lifestyle improvements forever. It's about making sure those improvements are a deliberate choice you're making with your eyes open, instead of a default behavior that quietly consumes every raise before you've had a chance to decide anything at all. There's a massive difference between choosing to upgrade your apartment because it genuinely improves your life and upgrading it simply because the extra money was sitting there and it felt like the natural next step.
Here's the mindset shift that actually matters more than any specific percentage or dollar amount. Every time you get a raise, ask yourself one question before you spend a single dollar of it. What would it look like if I treated this raise the same way I treat a stranger's money that I'm responsible for investing wisely? Not money to be absorbed automatically into your existing lifestyle, but money that deserves an intentional decision. That single mental shift, applied consistently over a career, is the difference between someone whose net worth grows every single year they get a raise and someone who ends up in the exact same financial position no matter how many promotions they collect. Because here's the truth that this entire video is really about. The salary trap isn't really about salaries at all. It's about the gap between what you earn and what you decide to do with it. And that gap is completely within your control, regardless of how much you're currently making. Someone earning $200,000 a year can be just as trapped in this cycle as someone earning $50,000 if they've never made a deliberate decision about where their raises go. And someone earning a modest income who makes that decision early can end up wealthier than a peer who earns twice as much and never questions where the money goes. Your income is not the thing standing between you and financial security. The decisions you make in the moments right after your income changes are what actually determine your future.
And here's the part I really want you to sit with. If you're watching this and thinking about a raise you already got, one that seemed to disappear into thin air, don't beat yourself up about it. You didn't do anything unusual. You did exactly what most people do. Because nobody ever sat you down and explained that a raise needs a plan just as much as your original paycheck did. The good news is that this isn't a mistake you have to keep repeating. Your very next raise, your next bonus, your next unexpected windfall is a completely clean slate. You get to decide, in advance, before the money even lands, what percentage of it becomes your future and what percentage becomes your present. That one decision, repeated every single time your income moves, is the entire difference between a career full of raises that quietly vanish and a career that actually compounds into real financial security. Start making those decisions on purpose, starting with your very next raise, because your future self is counting on the choice you make today.